Welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. Everyone's protein obsessed these days. Protein bars, cookies, water, milk. You'd think it was a macronutrient that most people are missing. But here's the truth. The real deficiency in the American diet is fiber. Fiber might just be the most underestimated game changer for heart health, blood sugar, weight loss, and even hunger. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. I'm Richie.
And I am Amber.
And Amber, today we are talking about fiber. The title of this episode is Fiber is the New Protein, by which we are alluding to the fact that, let me just say, in marketing specifically to people of my gender and age group, there seems to be, let's just call it an obsession with getting ever larger volumes of protein into your diet. And I don't know if you're getting the same thing as well. I suspect you are, but I don't know where this is coming from. And I think you're of the opinion that really protein isn't a thing that we're suffering from a lack of, but really that fiber is the key to moving forward, specifically as it relates to diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and blood sugar management.
Yes, I would love to see fiber get even half the attention that protein is getting lately. And I think there's a couple of reasons why fiber is getting attention: carnivore craze, ketogenic diets.
Why protein's getting attention?
Oh, sorry. In my mind, that's what I said. Yes, there are reasons protein is getting more attention. But the reality is 95% of Americans are meeting their protein needs. Now, this is excluding older adults because typically a third of older adults are not meeting that RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram.
Can you say that one more time just so we're clear? Because I've heard a lot of different numbers on this. What is the recommended daily allowance of protein for a normal human being?
Nitrogen balance studies, which, you know, it's really gross. Like, you wear this suit, they collect all of the byproduct of protein breakdown: hair, nails, fingertips, hair, fingernails.
I tell you what, it is a testament to how long we've been together. I didn't even blink.
Wow.
Like, oh, yes,
fingertips. These nitrogen balance studies collected everything: stool, urine, all of the nitrogenous waste. The nitrogenous waste products were collected and showed even less than 0.8 grams per kilogram. But then from that, a recommended dietary allowance of 0.8 grams per kilogram was formed to meet the needs of most individuals on most days. Now, more recent research has suggested that women in perimenopause may need more. Elderly individuals definitely could use more. But as a whole, most Americans are going to have their needs met, non-athletes, I should also say, by 0.8 grams per kilogram. Now, if you are building muscle, of course, you're going to need more. Okay. But if you look at population in general, 95% of the U.S. population get enough protein. Okay.
So really, whatever the marketing is has nothing to do with 95% of the people on the planet. And in fact,
no, I didn't say the planet. I said Americans.
Yeah, good.
Because you go to Africa, I mean, you do see protein, energy, malnutrition. You do see those sorts of things in sub-Saharan Africa, but you don't see it in the United States. And that's my point.
Okay. And I do think that most of the marketing is around a product. Let me sell you a bar.
Oh, it's big business. Absolutely.
Or a powder or something to supplement what you're getting through
your protein cookie, your Fairlife protein milk, your, not to call out anything in particular, but my gosh, I have seen so much of that Fairlife milk milk floating around. And the reality is 95% of Americans do not get enough fiber. So completely the opposite, where you have 95% of Americans getting enough protein, 95% of Americans are not getting enough fiber. And it's so abysmal, the amount of fiber that the typical American gets. We're talking 10 to 15 grams a day. Okay. So the minimum recommended is 25 to 35 grams. Women are more the 25 and men are more on the 35 gram. And truly, like if you're trying to actively improve blood sugar or heart health, 50 grams a day would be closer to what's recommended.
Okay. So probably before we go much further, if you're going to sell me on increasing fiber in my diet, can you tell us a little bit about why? What's fiber doing in our bodies? What do we need to get more fiber?
So dietary fiber refers to those non-digestible carbohydrates that are really only found in plant foods. And so it used to be that you had soluble and insoluble fiber, some things that could be broken down by your body, and then others that leave the digestive tract completely undigested. But now it's more about this viscosity and gel formation when you talk about different fibers.
What does that mean?
So viscosity is related to fiber's ability to both bind or hold water, kind of like a sponge.
Okay.
And it's really this viscosity and fermentability that's most associated with the health benefits of fiber. And the insoluble fiber is more about adding bulk to your stool, reabsorbing water in the colon. That's your... But you have a little bit of a combination in the insoluble and the soluble, which is why they have gotten away from that. And it's more about the viscosity and the gel formation. But you need this to have regularity. Like things are supposed to have a certain gut transit time, and then you get rid of it so that your body can keep functioning as it should. Because you can have things like diverticulosis, just so many conditions, from Crohn's disease to, I shouldn't say Crohn's disease, that's a whole, I'm not even going to go in that direction because that's a whole other thing. But yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that fiber is doing? And actually, while I'm thinking about it, you talked a little bit about the non-digestible carbohydrate bit. It sounds to me like the refinement of food essentially removes the fiber.
It sounds right. Sounds like you're getting the idea. Yes.
So really, when we talk about like a processed food, and certainly ultra processed foods, what's gone is the fiber. Like the calorie portion of it, the piece I can digest is still there. But the insoluble or insoluble fiber.
The fiber, because the more it's broken down, the more things are. So if you think about the wheat germ, let's go to the field. Let's get a wheat plant, and you have the endosperm, the whole wheat germ, and a lot of the nutrition. You have the psyllium husk. You have all of these things that are meant to be taken in and eaten and broken down, but we have processed and milled these things to strip away that. That's why if you look at a label of bread, for example, the number one ingredient is going to be enriched white flour. It's enriched because they stripped it of all the B vitamins. They stripped it of the nutrition, and then noticed deficiencies in people. So they had to add this all back in, what they took away, but it didn't get added in appropriately. Like you can't, it's if I slapped you in the face and then said, oops, I'm sorry, that doesn't take away the fact that I slapped you in the face. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And the same thing is happening to a certain extent. I'm not the best with analogies, but that's
true. That's true.
You wouldn't forgive me. But fiber is powerful. It does so many things. So if we really look at its role in heart health, let's say, it's going to bind to cholesterol-rich bile acids. So bile is released in response to foods, especially fatty foods. You have these bile acids released to help digest the food that you eat. And the viscous gel from the fiber traps bile, and it reduces the reabsorption of bile in the ileum. So you have in your small intestine, you have the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum. So you have the different sections of it. It doesn't really matter because this bile is ultimately excreted in the feces. And so the bile pool that exists in the liver is decreased. So the liver has to take in cholesterol, and LDL cholesterol in particular. Remember when we did our core dysfunctions of type 2, we talked about when you eat too much, you have these repackaged LDL cholesterol that's getting in there. So you're actually using some of that LDL cholesterol to make new bile. So that's the way that fiber can reduce cholesterol and improve heart health, by binding to those bile acids. And it also reduces inflammation and supports blood pressure. And that's mostly what used to more be termed as soluble fiber, your oats, beans, chia seeds. And the higher intake of those is associated with a reduced risk of heart attack and stroke.
Okay.
So if we're talking about the benefits of heart disease, why that's so important in the setting of type 2 diabetes is heart disease is the number one killer of Americans. And if you have type 2 diabetes, it's just assumed that you also have heart disease.
You're at greater risk for heart disease, certainly. Yeah.
Because you're at up to 4.5 times greater risk of heart disease. So there are inverse associations between dietary fiber intake and the risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Say that again.
There's an inverse association between dietary fiber intake and the risk of developing type 2. And I have to say that's really to be considered protective to decrease the risk of type 2. We're talking about a consumption of about 30 grams of fiber a day.
Okay. So, but again, want to be very clear. My ears perk up.
Yeah.
For those in our audience that do not currently have type 2 diabetes and do not want to have type 2 diabetes, consistently increasing the volume of fiber in your diet decreases the likelihood that you will develop type 2 diabetes. Okay.
So essentially, when you eat, fiber can create more of a distended stomach. Mm-hmm. The stomach stretches, and those stretch receptors send signals to your brain that says, I'm full. And your vagus nerve is having a more slow release of food down through the digestive tract. And it's interesting because you have this slow yet faster motility. So it's you have this delayed digestion because it's more viscous and the body's really trying to grab all of the nutrition from it. But also you have increased peristalsis, which is this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back action of the gut. So you have this squeezing and moving of the gut, and people tend to burn more calories even in their sleep the more fiber that they have. And it's thought to be, at least in part, due to this increased gut motility.
This is taking more energy to digest food.
Yes. So you have delayed gastric emptying, longer intestinal transit time. And
Amber, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is one of the things that GLP-1s are doing.
Exactly. When you have this moving on down the gut, so you still have nutrition buried in the food, if you will, and the body's trying to get at it. So as it moves further down the intestine, it signals the release of those satiety hormones like GLP-1 and peptide-YY from the intestinal L cells. And these cells are only like one cell thick, but you have those villi that are finger-like projections in the intestine, really trying to grab all the nutrition. But that's going to do all of the same mechanisms that we've talked about in the past with GLP-1, improving insulin sensitivity, glucose-dependent release of insulin. And you're really feeding the gut bacteria, which produces these short-chain fatty acids and reduces the blood sugar spikes overall. And that high volume of fiber can enhance and prolong the secretion of cholecystokinin. So if you think about like the gut hormones that help with satiety, you have the cholecystokinin, the peptide YY, the GLP-1, the GIP, glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide. And in these high fiber foods, if you're really looking also at appetite and weight control and the ways that can help with type 2 diabetes, this is the way that it works with cholecystokinin is that it signals to the brain that you're full, and it extends that post-meal satiety or fullness. And high fiber foods can encapsulate fat and starch, which reduces the efficiency of digestion, which is why I was saying it moves further down the digestive tract and really involves that GLP-1 and the peptide YY receptors there, because some of those calories get trapped in the plant walls, especially your whole plant foods, your nuts, your seeds, legumes, intact grains. When I was talking about the grain and the full endosperm, all of that stuff. And what's really interesting is that you could lose about 5 to 10% of caloric absorption when you're on a high fiber whole wheat diet.
Okay. To me, the layperson.
Oh, is that who you is?
Yeah.
To me.
And in general, just trying to save money month to month, this sounds like a less expensive version of what the GLP-1s are doing in my body. Before advocating or going to my physician and trying to get on a GLP-1, which is not
to the tune of
often not
$700 to
right?
$800 a month for some people.
Might want to just try to increase some of the
fiber
in
intake?
your diet. See how it works for you.
Yeah.
I can tell you from my personal experience, when I am getting adequate amounts of fiber in my diet, I really just am not hungry.
Yes, it absolutely can make you feel more full. That is a big role.
My propensity to, or let's say my susceptibility to the jelly beans is greatly reduced when the volume of just beans in my diet is increased.
Yeah, and there are about 12 different fiber types, and each one has its unique properties. And it's interesting to me that you really can't, fiber supplements just don't show the same results as increasing whole grains. And so there have been questions like, is that due to the fact that people who are eating whole grains tend to be having more fruits and vegetables? And what's the role in that versus just fiber? So they use different things. They had, when we talk about short chain fatty acids being released, there's actually this tube that you can put all the way down to like the ileocecal valve area and release more of these short chain fatty acids, and you show benefits in those people. And an interesting study that is not dissimilar to that, the whole thing about feeling full and losing some calories and some of the benefits of fiber, was one that was done on nut consumption and fecal fat. And I love this study because They say you are what you eat, and I'm a nut. And so this controlled trial that compared different nut diets found that in whole peanuts, 17.8% of the dietary fat from the whole peanut was excreted. And in peanut butter, 7% of the fat was excreted. And in peanut oil, you only had 4.5% excretion of the fat. So in other words, the more intact the nut, the less your body was able to absorb all of it.
Okay.
So I would not want to be the researcher in that study, but I will take their word for it.
I don't know that AI is going to be able to pick that up quickly. So that might be an interesting job opportunity going forward.
For you, not for me. Not for me. And then there's also this gut-brain connection. And we've talked about this in a little bit in some of our 12 core defect discussions. But your gut bacteria can generate neurotransmitters as well as other metabolites. So the majority of our cells, let's say, are bacteria.
You're talking about in our gut microbiome.
In our gut microbiome.
Okay.
Yes. Lots of bacteria. And they can impact brain function through this gut-brain axis, which is a bidirectional communication network involving the gut hormones, the GLP-1, GIP, peptide-YY, and the enteric nervous system, or the nerves along the digestive tract, namely the vagus nerve and the microbiota. So it's not just the microbiota of the gut, also in the brain. And you have your hypothalamus, which has a huge role in the regulation of hunger and fullness. So
I'm a visual thinker. In my mind, I'm just imagining almost like Ratatouille controlling the cooking bit. I've got these little microbes that are driving the human machine to consume more, whatever it is, based off of what they want or need.
yeah, I think it is thought that is the main way that the body was able, through generations, thousands of years, to regulate and control body weight. When you break down all of this, these signals come and say you've had enough, which makes you feel full, and then you don't eat as much. And like it's just, it all communicates, which I think is so interesting, thinking about what we have control over and what we don't, and how perfectly designed our bodies are to understand our caloric needs on any given day. Thank God I don't have to use some app to make sure I'm always hitting a certain calorie need, because it's going to vary day to day. It's going to vary the most depending on my activity level for the day. It's going to vary depending on how much muscle mass I have.
If you're sensitive to the signals.
Very good point. Yes. If you're listening to your body, if you're intuitive with that.
Full disclosure, you're probably the most attuned person I've ever met.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is practiced through decades of really trying to personally, I avoid artificial sweeteners, because I've seen studies that suggest that they can interfere with your hunger and satiety cues, and I do not want to do that. And yes, they are generally recognized as safe. I will say they have GRAS status, and I do think that they're not all created equal. You would definitely be more likely to see me with some Splenda versus something else, that little pink, whatever, sucralose, different things like that. But I just, in general, I don't feel it's necessary. I think it can create unnecessary bloating and really dysbiome of the gut. Honestly, I've seen enough people eat a whole bunch of sugar-free chocolates and have diarrhea. And I've seen it used in nursing home settings to help elderly residents use the bathroom. So I'm just not.
They've used the artificial sweeteners as a laxative?
Well, mannitol is often given. Yes.
Wow.
Nothing else to say to that? Okay.
I wasn't ready for that. Normally, I'm the person bringing that to the podcast. And
You
today
are.
You surprised me. You stepped it up.
You're welcome. So let's talk about what fiber intake is recommended and what it would look like if you decided to try to step it up. So we know that 25 to 35 grams a day is the minimum recommended. It's so funny. There was also a study that looked at fiber and diverticulosis and if it could prevent that. And the study headline was, a high fiber diet cannot prevent diverticulosis, which is where you get these out pockets in the colon and your gastrointestinal tract that can become inflamed. And then that goes to diverticulitis, which is an inflamed condition. And then those can actually burst and it's nasty.
I think a couple of professional wrestlers have nearly died of that, if I recall.
Yeah,
correctly.
yes. Because if not caught early, you could become septic and die, and it can cause you to need a colon resection and all sorts of nasty stuff. So anyway, they said that a high fiber diet does not reduce your risk of this. However, the high fiber diet group was getting 25 grams of fiber a day, which is the minimum fiber recommendation for women, not for men. For men, it's like 35 to 38 grams. So it was interesting that study said it doesn't do a high fiber diet, doesn't, but that's not a high fiber diet. It's very subjective.
Really illustrates who the non-high fiber diet was. if the bare minimum was the high fiber one.
Yeah, and we talked about how the average American gets 10 to 15. So compared to 10 to 15, you're almost double at 25 grams. So really studies looking at prevention of type 2 diabetes, 30 grams a day was the minimum recommended. Honest, really, truly, 50 grams a day would be optimal for your blood sugar and gut health. And my goal is to try to get to 100 grams a day, which I am not at that.
Let's just be very clear.
Right, let's get to 50 consistently first.
50 grams would be really good, particularly for people who have type 2 diabetes or
50
who want
grams
to
would be
avoid
amazing
getting
for
diabetes.
most people. Absolutely. Yes. Would you like to know why I have such ambitious goals for fiber?
I'm going to hear it.
Like to hear it? Here you go. Because there's an inverse relationship between dietary fiber intake and overall mortality. And I plan to live well past 100. So I best get my fiber intake up really high.
But at 100 grams, like we're almost into, what's the word? I'm almost doing...
I'm a cow. No, yeah. At 100 grams, it doesn't leave room for a lot of extraneous calories. That's the truth. It's a lot of beans, a lot of lentils, a lot of chia seeds,
I'm doing
berries.
this more from just a cautionary, like you would need to scale up over a long time to get to that.
Great point.
Realistic and full stop. Once we're getting to these very high levels of dietary fiber, isn't there some less absorption of the food and stuff that's going in there with very high levels of stuff? So again, it's great for a personal goal, but that's a personal goal. I think that the takeaway for the audience is you can get to 50. That'd be freaking awesome.
If you get 50, that would be awesome. I agree. And you do want to go slow. So a recommendation. And remember, I am not your dietitian. I am a dietitian. I am not your diabetes educator. I am a diabetes educator. So everybody is different. I have to disclaimer, this is not health advice, but it would be recommended to increase, if you wanted to, 5 grams per week. Like really do an assessment of where you are right. Like how much fiber are you taking in? And then try to increase that by 5 grams a day for the next week. And then the following week, another 5 grams. And it'd be very important to also increase your water intake, because we talked about the viscosity of that and how it's kind of like a dry sponge and it's going to pull in water.
So
it's going to pull water into the intestinal tract.
With increased
yes.
fiber. Okay.
And that's usually not hard, because even though fruits and vegetables are a lesser content of fiber, they would likely be increased. So you've got a higher water content of your food there. So it wouldn't be too hard to have additional hydration from that. And then you just want to, at least in the beginning, make sure to properly cook your beans and lentils to try to get some of those indigestible things out of there a little bit more. Everyone around you will also thank you, as the old song used to go about beans being good for your heart and other things that rhyme.
I understand that they're categorized as a magic fruit as well.
The more you eat them, toot toot. Yeah. So let's just a little bit down into recommendations of where the sources are. So really, we're talking about beans, peas, lentils, legumes. This is about getting more beans, really, because these just...
What about oats?
Oats, yeah. Oats or groats. Oats and groats and stuff, yeah.
And I got to... Personally, chia seeds are awesome. I never thought that, like, just a very small addition of chia seeds to breakfast could have that much fiber in it. But that, for me, that was the lowest hanging fruit, the highest, without really much change in diet to get some more fiber in there. Thank God for those chia seeds.
Yep. So in the realm of nuts and seeds, you could do chia seeds, ground flax seeds, pumpkin seeds. Almonds are one of the higher nuts with fiber.
But not almond milk.
Not almond milk.
Okay. Again,
almonds. So again, it's that
not
whole
processed, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the study that kind of looked at nuts versus peanut butter versus peanut oil. You're going to have a lot more fiber in the whole food. Prunes, every.
You know what? I didn't think, but yes, I think I could certainly. I think my grandmother first introduced me to prunes when I was about 6. And she really liked those prunes. They were a real dietary staple for her.
Yeah. There's a reason. Raspberries, blackberries in your fruit department. Kiwi, like I love eating golden kiwi because you can eat the skin. You get some good fiber.
Yeah, we've recently started adding. I think I've had a golden kiwi almost a day for the past couple of weeks. They are awesome.
I would say every other day, because I think there are like 8 in there, and between you and I, we eat them in a week. So I think every other day I have a kiwi. And artichokes. So like in your vegetable department, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and cauliflower are more of the higher fiber content.
Do avocados have fiber?
A little bit, not much, a little bit.
But I mean,
it's really about the culmination throughout the day.
There's the big bang for your buck stuff. But again, I think almost all of the fruits and vegetables have a little bit in there.
Yes.
If I'm increasing that is going to also increase the whole
when you
total.
look at the fact that most Americans don't get the required fiber, you could look at how that correlates to the fact that they also do not meet the 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Yeah. Correlating for sure. Let's go back to the beans and legumes, just because I think sometimes people just think like black beans, red beans, things like that. And those are perfectly fine. You don't have to venture beyond that, but your lentils are great sources. Chickpeas are really helpful. Hummus is chickpea, sesame seeds, all of that.
Now, because the hummus is broken down, is
Not
it
as good as
dense
whole
than normal
chickpeas.
Okay.
Yeah, so you've got this spectrum here. And then you've mentioned oats in terms of whole grains, quinoa, barley, bulgur, farro, all of those things. Popcorn is actually probably a source that people feel like they've got in their cabinet now and they could eat, but be careful with the fat content of the popcorn.
Okay.
None of that hydrogenated oils, not your movie theater butter, hold the butter popcorn. Yeah.
All right. So if we can wrap it up, tie a bow on it, what would you ask our listeners to do this week? How can they take what they've just heard and apply it to what to do like right now?
I said it. You take inventory. Where are you?
Okay.
And then add 5 more grams. Or if you don't want to take inventory, find something that's 5 grams of fiber and add it. But really, probably the most simple way, like if I really distilled it down, what's really simple that you can do? Add a half cup of beans daily to what you're doing now.
Okay. Super simple.
Yeah.
To me, the ask is start getting an inventory of what's going in your mouth. Like we haven't been too explicit, I think, to date.
Here's the thing. If you just add a half a cup of beans to your diet, you don't really have to do inventory. There was a study that looked at people who were told to increase their bean consumption by so much a day versus do that plus follow the American Heart Association standards for changing your meat from red to white meat, changing your fats from saturated to monounsaturated and some polyunsaturated. So they were given all these guidelines, or just increase your bean consumption. And those who were just told to increase their bean consumption actually doubled what they were recommended in the beginning and just secondarily met the majority of the other recommendations as the other group. And there was really no difference between the two. So I'm all about keep it simple. The more distilled and like the less steps and chaos you can put in between you and what needs to be done, like just do what needs to be done. And a very easy thing is to add a half cup of beans.
I guess where I was going with it is just add a cup of beans sounds a lot like half a cup of beans sounds a lot like just do this one thing or just don't eat this other thing, or like
you're not wrong.
It's a good place to start. But really what I was trying to get to is for our audience that has diabetes and does not want to have diabetes, big picture stuff, you have to know what's going in your mouth. You have to know the content, what's in the stuff that's going in your mouth, because until you get a wrap on that, or at least understand that, you can't really start to make positive change until like just what baseline is.
Yeah. So look at the number one ingredient on whatever food. Firstly, increase fruits, vegetables, beans as best you can. Look at if you buy something that has an ingredient label, does it say 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain, such and such? If that's not the number one ingredient, it's probably not the best thing for you. But you could also look at the total carbs versus the fiber, and you could divide the total carbs by the fiber. And if the factor is not 5 or higher, that's probably not a high fiber source of food.
Okay. And I think to further spell it out, maybe even a little more, when my diet is high in fiber, I'm less hungry. When my diet is high in fiber, there just isn't room for me to make, let's just call it, not as good food choices. There's less desire. There's less opportunity. If I'm full, I'm not trying to raid the cabinet trying to find some snacks or something like that.
That's those stretch receptors that send the signal.
Fullness. which is really where I was trying to.
Delayed gastric emptying. Yeah. If the food is emptying more slowly out of your stomach, you're going to feel more full. And there's also a blunting of the post-meal blood sugar. So instead of this roller coaster, like up, down, you have more of a flattening effect when you increase your fiber intake.
This is a very cheap and easy and accessible way to get a lot of the same effects as the GLP-1 injections. And probably a better place to start.
Why would you take a medicine to do what your body can do naturally?
And sustainable. It's sustainable.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. That was a lot about fiber. I guess I'm going to go eat half a cup of beans now.
To each their own. I've had 2 cups.
I know.
Of Lint. Stop it. You storyteller. Oh my gosh. Okay, wrap it up. Okay. Done with you.
All right.
Not really.
Thank you for listening to the Diabetes Podcast. As always, if you aren't following the program, please follow the program. That helps us to continue bringing free information to you every week. And I'll go with an additional ask. Tell a friend. If you know somebody that has diabetes and does not want to have type 2 diabetes, please get them to listen. We are putting out good stuff every single week, actionable stuff that you can do to start moving towards diabetes remission. As always, thank you for listening to the Diabetes Podcast. If this episode opened your eyes to just how powerful fiber is, I hope you're walking away with more than just facts. I hope you're walking away with hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the path to better blood sugar, fewer meds, more energy, and real satisfaction with food isn't as complicated as you've been led to believe. Fiber isn't sexy. It doesn't have a lobby, but it works. So here's your next best step. Track your fiber for one day. Just get curious. And if you're ready to take it further, tag us at Empowered Diabetes and show us how you're adding it to your plate. No judgment, just celebration. Because change doesn't have to mean restriction. It doesn't have to mean giving up joy. Until next time, take courage. You can do this, and we can help.